Okay, preface. After the disappearance of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada from this mortal world on November 14th, 1977, many of his disciples saw a need for an authorized biography of Srila Prabhupada. The responsibility of commissioning such a work rested with the governing body commission of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. At their annual meeting in 1978, the GBC resolved that a biography of Srila Prabhupada should be written and that I would be the author. According to the Vaishnava tradition, if one aspires to write transcendental literature, he must first take permission from his spiritual master and Krishna. A good example of this is Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, the author of Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu's authorized biography, Sri Caitanya Charitamrita. As Krishnadas Kaviraj has explained, screen is not moving. In Vrindavan, there were also many other great devotees, all of whom he desired to hear the last pastimes of Lord Caitanya. By their mercy, all these devotees ordered me to write of the last pastimes of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Because of their order only, although I am shameless, I have attempted to write this Caitanya Charitamrita. Having received the order of the Vaishnavas, but being anxious within my heart, I went back to the temple of Madan Mohan in Vrindavan to ask his permission also. So now Satsarup Maharaj will, with this as the context, he will say why Srila Prabhupada's Leelamrita is an authorized biography. So the context is very important to understand why we call Srila Prabhupada's Leelamrita as authorized biography. So to say the Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita is an authorized biography does not mean that it is a flattering portrait commissioned by an official body, but that it is an authorized literature presented by one who is serving the order of Krishna and Guru through the disciplic succession. As such, Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita is not written from the mundane or speculative viewpoint, nor can ordinary biographers comprehend the significance and meaning of the life of a pure devotee of God. Were such persons to objectively study the life of Srila Prabhupada, the esoteric meanings would evade them. Were they to charitably try to praise Srila Prabhupada, they would not know how. But because Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita is authorized through the transcendental process, it can transparently present the careful reader with a true picture of Srila Prabhupada. So, this is a very important point for us to understand, that Srila Prabhupada cannot be understood through our conditioned senses. Just like Krishna cannot be understood through our conditioned senses, the pure devotee of the Lord can also not be understood through our conditioned senses. Therefore, it is said that those who have implicit faith, yasya deve para bhakti, those who have implicit faith in both in the yasya deve para bhakti verse, you find that one who has implicit faith in both Krishna and the spiritual master, then all the purports of the Vedic literatures are revealed in the heart. So, just as we place faith in Krishna, we're also meant to place our faith in Srila Prabhupada. So that's what it means. That Krishna, when he appeared on this planet, it was 5,000 years ago. So when we hear about it, because we read from the Krishna book, it appears extraordinary, Krishna. But while he was present on the planet, he was extraordinary, of course. But since he was playing the role of a human being, he was still playing the role of a human being. So even great personalities were bewildered, observing his human-like activities. The classic example of that is Lord Brahma. Now, Lord Brahma, when he saw Krishna along with his cowherd boyfriends eating, what happens is when these, what happens every day is that when Krishna goes with the cowherd boys to the forest of Vrindavan, they share their lunch during lunchtime. And Brahminical children are trained, not, I mean, they're trained in the principles of cleanliness. This is Suchi, this is Muchi, and things like that. They're very well trained in all the different aspects of cleanliness, especially. So when Brahma saw Krishna not even exhibiting the characteristics of a Brahmana boy, he's simply eating from somebody else's tiffin box and things like that. So then he became bewildered. This is Lord Brahma. Now, Lord Brahma has got an extremely difficult task. I mean, creation is not an ordinary thing. I mean, the amount of work that it is involved to create everything perfectly, everything has to be created. Perfectly in the sense that perfectly for the world to work as desired by the Lord. So he's considered as the most intelligent being is Lord Brahma. Now, even the most intelligent being can become bewildered. So what is our lesson from us? If Lord Brahma, the most intelligent being, can get bewildered by seeing the pastimes of Krishna, so it is natural that those of us who don't have the intelligence like Brahma can get bewildered by seeing some of the activities of Krishna. So like that, it is also very natural. It is, I wouldn't say natural. It is very expected that because we don't have, I mean, anyway, we are nowhere near the intelligence of Brahma. And if Brahma would get bewildered seeing Lord Krishna, similarly, the Krishna and his pure devotees, we are meant to place implicit faith. Yasya deve parabhakti. So it is possible that we may get bewildered seeing sometimes the activities of Srila Prabhupada. They may appear human-like. So, but they are always on the transcendental platform. Just like Krishna, Shalva, he creates illusion that Vasudeva is dead. So Krishna begins to cry and all that. And that looks very human, right? Very human. In fact, it looks like an ordinary conditioned soul. But he is Krishna, the super soul in everybody's heart. He doesn't know that Vasudeva is not dead. So when Krishna enacts these pastimes, he makes it appear as if he is like a human being. But he is not. In all circumstances of his life, Krishna is not a human being. He is always the transcendentally perfect supreme personality of God. Similarly, with the Nitya, we come to that. At least for now, Srila Prabhupada has come. All his activities may appear human-like, but he has no comparison to a human being. It's just appearance of a human. Just like Krishna, he may behave like a human being, but he has no comparison to a human being. Similarly, Prabhupada may behave like a human being, but there cannot be any comparison to a human being with Srila Prabhupada. He belongs to a different category of personalities. Okay. Another important aspect of the what Satsuru Maharaj is trying to say is that by studying the Lilamrita, he's trying to transparently present the careful reader with the true picture of Srila Prabhupada. So that is the purpose of the Lilamrita, that you clearly understand who Srila Prabhupada is. Okay. And one of the characteristics of the Lord is that why does the Lord behave like a human being? It is explained by Acharyas that some of the characteristics of the Lord, some of the pastimes of the Lord are Asura Mohana, which means that they are meant to bewilder the atheistic class of men. For example, Krishna's disappearance. I mean, we are told, or we read the story that he disappeared because some hunter tried to kill him. That's how we hear that. Okay, he hit an arrow on the Krishna's toe, and therefore he left his body. Now, our acharyas have explained that this is like the performance of a magician. Magicians, they perform a trick sometimes. They place a man or a woman on a table. They take a knife and they chop the head of the person. So, for all practical purpose, we think the person, oh, the head is chopped, is dead. But it is a performance. It's meant to bewilder the ordinary beings. The magician can do things like that. It's called magic. So, like that, Krishna does sometimes just meant to bewilder. That's all. But those who have proper knowledge, so those who have, first of all, that knowledge comes from faith. That is the whole point of Yasya Bhaktir. Yatha deve tatha guru. Yatha deve tatha guru. Oh, it says internet translation. Can you unmute and check whether they are able to hear me? Yeah. Huh? Sure. Okay. So, Yasya deve parabhaktir tatha yatha deve tatha guru. So, just as we consider God, we should just as we put faith in God, we should also put faith in the Guru. Here we are discussing properly Lamrita. So we need to put that same faith in Prabhupada. So then what happens? Then all the meanings of the scriptures are revealed in our heart. All the entire meaning of scripture is revealed in our heart. The whole scripture, suddenly our heart illuminates like the sun. So when our heart is illuminated as brilliant as the sun, then we know, oh, these are all magical acts. These are all meant to be bewildered, like Krishna's disappearance. Similarly, we're able to understand through that scripture being revealed in our heart, oh, this was just an act of magic by Krishna. Similarly, if we don't have the same faith in Prabhupada also, we should have the same faith in Krishna Prabhupada in as much, not any bit lesser. The same faith that we have in Krishna, the same faith we have to have in Srila Prabhupada. Then transcendental knowledge is revealed in our heart. And when transcendental knowledge is revealed in our heart, then we are able to understand the pastime in its actuality. Okay. Let's go to the next paragraph. Another aspect of the authenticity of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita is the vast amount of carefully researched information that I'm able to focus into each volume. The leading devotees of the Krishna consciousness movement, in addition to giving me permission to render this work, have also invited the world community of ISKCON devotees to help me in gathering detailed information about the life and person of Srila Prabhupada. The Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, Prabhupada's publishing house, has given me his collection of letters totaling over 7,000. Please take a note of this. Prabhupada wrote over 7,000 letters. That is in a span of from 1965. Of course, there may be, I don't know if he has included the pre-65 collection. 65 to 77 is when he wrote a majority of his letters. So still, that is an approximation of 7,000 is not an ordinary number. And scores of Prabhupada disciples have granted interviews and submitted diaries and memoirs of their association with Srila Prabhupada. Aside from his disciples, we have interviewed many persons in various walks of life who met Srila Prabhupada over the years. The result is that we have a rich, composite view of Srila Prabhupada, drawn from many persons who knew him in many different situations and stages of his life. The acknowledgement sections in this book lists the persons who cooperated to bring about Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. Despite the authorized nature of this book, and despite the support of my many well-wishers, I must confess that in attempting to describe the glories of our spiritual master, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, I am like a small bird trying to empty the ocean by carrying drops of water to the land. The picture I have given of Srila Prabhupada is only a glimpse into his unlimited mercy, and that glimpse has only been possible by the grace of Guru and Krishna. So he gives a very beautiful analogy here. Uh, this is like, there's a pastime which Prabhupada narrated in this regard, but this is slightly different. But concept is there it was determination, but here he's trying to show the quantity. Like there, what happened was the sparrow had lost his eggs, so it made up this. It was determined that I will try to empty the ocean, removing water on my small beaks to try to retrieve my eggs. So Prabhupada said that's an example of determination. Here he's talking about. Here in this context, he's talking about a small bird trying to empty the ocean means how much can the small bird take away? That's the whole point that he's trying to make. So Prabhupada is like a ocean. So how much can, so he's trying to compare ocean, how much can a small bird try to take away? So like that, he's saying that I'm only giving a glimpse into the unlimited mercy. And that glimpse has only been possible by the grace of Guru and Krishna. Satsvarup Das Goswami. Okay, let's go to the introduction next.
The next step.
Next step.
Yeah. Okay. Oh.
Okay, here. From childhood, Srila Prabhupada worshipped Lord Krishna, understanding him to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the source of all existence. And beginning at age 22, after his first meeting with his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada became more and more active in spreading the teachings of Lord Krishna. In Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita Volume 1, we see Srila Prabhupada struggling alone to publish Back to God magazine, personally typing, editing, visiting the printer, and then distributing the copies on the streets of New Delhi. Working alone in Jhansi, India, Prabhupada gathered a few part-time followers to create the League of Devotees, an early attempt to enact his vision of introducing people from all nations, races, and levels of society to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, this is something which what we need to carefully take note of here is throughout his life, of course, he tried with his god brothers and so many things he tried. Throughout his life, until he reached the shores of America, he was utterly alone, and he was single-handedly doing everything. Utterly alone, and he would single-handedly do everything. You did not have even a single person who actually contributed to his effort to spread Krishna consciousness. Of course, he had a disciple in India called Acharya Prabhakar, who was a follower, but but he did not participate in helping Prabhupada in his missionary activities, or at least we don't have a record of that, either from Prabhupada or from any other source of Acharya Prabhakar having done something to help Prabhupada spread Krishna consciousness to all parts of the world. So this is something that we need to carefully remember, that Prabhupada is utterly alone, and that's sometimes very important for us to remember, because once Prabhupada wrote in a letter that what is this alone? I never felt that I was ever alone. I was always with my spiritual master. So here, he brings that out, Satsvarup brings that out in the next paragraph. So Prabhupada is still alone as he arrived in America in 1965. But before that, in the previous paragraph, the amount of work that was involved. He did alone in Jhansi. Then he was personally, he was trying to publish Back to God magazine. But he personally is typing. He's himself the editor. He's himself visiting the printer. He's himself distributing the copies. It's a one-man company. That's it. So everything by a single man. It is very difficult, but Prabhupada was very determined to do it. Okay. So Srila Prabhupada is still alone as he arrived in America in 1965. But he was filled with faith in Krishna and determination to establish Krishna consciousness in the West, and thus fulfill the desire of a spiritual master and the prediction of the scriptures and previous saints. Young men and women on New York's Lower East Side joined, attracted not so much to Vedic culture. Give me 1 second. Krishna. I was wondering, what is this? Okay. This introduction is different from the introduction I have in my book. I was just wondering what? I mean, something appears very different. Okay. Can you just okay? Let's finish. Let's go with this. Let's go with this for now. Okay, and we'll see what where it leads it. Srila Prabhupada is still alone as he arrived in America in 1965. But he was filled with faith in Krishna and determination to establish Krishna consciousness in the West and thus fulfill the desire of a spiritual master and the prediction of the scriptures and previous saints. Young men and women on New York's Lower East Side joined, attracted not so much to Vedic culture as to Swamiji and his chanting of Hare Krishna. Thus, beginning from a small storefront, Srila Prabhupada introduced the Hare Krishna movement to America. So, Sasur Maharaj is making this point here that they were not so attracted to Vedic culture as to Swamiji. Now, we could say, isn't this the same that is happening with the Western people getting attracted to different gurus and yogis and all that? So, what is the big thing here? What is the big thing here? You know. So there is a big difference. There is a big difference that Prabhupada was the only Swamiji, as I put the quotes here. He was the only Swamiji who had any restrictions about anything. Actually. Everybody else, they said, you do whatever you want. And you can be a yogi, you can be whatever. But Prabhupada is the only person who introduced regulative principles, that too in the midst of people who want complete freedom. He said, you want freedom? Regulative principles are the key to that freedom. He gave them the key. Okay, what freedom? Here is the key. Take it. The regulative principles are the key to that freedom. So, in that sense, their attraction to Prabhupada was different from people generally getting attracted to yogis. They get attracted to yogis because they talk, their charisma, and some people hug, and the hugging a mother, and so many different people are there. But Prabhupada was not that kind of a guru. He did not do any magic. He was just talking about Krishna. And also introduced the 4 regulative principles right in the middle of America, which is rejecting all kinds of authority, rejecting all kinds of regulations. But Prabhupada is successful. So why? Because he is the personified Bhagavatam. Just as the Bhagavatam is attractive, the pure devotee, the Bhagavata, is also attractive. So their attraction, so we cannot compare the attraction of those who were attracted to Prabhupada to the attraction of those who get attracted to other gurus. There is a big difference. Okay. We follow Srila Prabhupada to San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury during the hippie heyday of 1967 as he establishes his Krishna conscious movement there, just as he had done in New York City. Then in May of 67, he appeared to suffer a heart attack and retired to India to recuperate. It became even clearer that the Krishna conscious movement, its life and its growth, depended entirely upon him. Although a few dozen sincere workers were dedicated to his service, they felt helpless and incompetent to do any missionary work or even to maintain their own spiritual vows to abstain from illicit sex, meat eating, intoxication, and gambling, unless he were personally present to lead them. In December of 1967, Srila Prabhupada returned to America and his young spiritual family. Again, the point is being made here that everything was dependent on Prabhupada. Even to maintain spiritual vows, they needed Prabhupada's presence. Then one can ask, what about, do we need Prabhupada's presence now to maintain spiritual vows? Of course, Prabhupada is present, even though not physically present. He's present. But at the same time, he has given us the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. He's made hundreds and thousands of followers. So we have a big association of devotees who can inspire us. Okay. As Srila Prabhupada would comment several years later, his movement didn't really begin until this return to America in December of 1967. His time was limited, he knew. The heart attack had proven that. Now, in whatever time was left, he had to accomplish his mission. And as the International Society for Krishna Consciousness began to grow, it gradually spread beyond its simple and sometimes humorous beginnings to become a spiritual institution considered noteworthy even among world religions. In the present volume, we follow Srila Prabhupada through the years of his greatest active participation in ISKCON. I think there's a problem here actually. Uh, okay, the problem is because I'm looking at the 7 volume set, you know, and this is the 2 volume set. So I guess that anyway, so that's why there are some different. When we gave out this Vidwan Gauranga Prabhu, we gave it out to them to read. We based it on the physical book, on this 7 volume book, not on the 2 volume book. Anyway, let's go ahead. In the present volume, we follow Srila Prabhupada through the years of his great active participation in ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, as its sole leader. In 1968, Srila Prabhupada has approximately 50 disciples and 6 ISKCON centers. So, I mean, this, as I already mentioned now, that this particular volume that he's referring to is referring to the online version. Also, some of you may have the physical version of 2 volumes. In India, they printed in 7 volumes. Previously, also, the BBT had printed it in 7 volumes. But then they condensed it into, in India, they condensed it into 1 volume, and some other part of the world, they condensed it into, not condensed it, they published it as, not condensed it, sorry. They published it as 2 volumes. In India, they even published it as 1 volume. So this present volume, what he's referring to, is referring to the 2 volume edition. In this present volume, we follow Srila Prabhupada through the years of his greatest active participation in ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, as its sole leader. In 1968, Srila Prabhupada has approximately 50 disciples and 6 ISKCON centers. Although his followers have increased their numbers, most of them are no more than sincere neophytes. Prabhupada is personally available to each of his disciples, and he continues to manage and maintain each center. Then in July of 1970, Srila Prabhupada forms his governing body commission and begins to turn over ISKCON's management to his board of GBC secretaries. Yet we find Prabhupada still actively guiding the activities of society, expanded by 1971 to 600 disciples and 65 centers. So in 3 years, Prabhupada went from 50 disciples and 6 centers to 50 to 600, which means 1 more 0 plus another 100. 500 plus 100. So it's quite a huge expansion in 3 years. And from 6 centers to 65 centers, so 5 after 6. Okay. Although the teachings of Krishna consciousness have existed since time immemorial within India's Sanskrit Vedic literatures and are the origin and essence of all religious expression, until Srila Prabhupada began his preaching, Krishna consciousness in its original purity had never been widely spread. So Prabhupada actually unlocked the Vedic teachings. He really unlocked it for the Western world. It lied locked up. For example, in India, we have this Anantapadmanabha Swami temple in Kerala, in Thiruvananthapuram. And it is estimated that the wealth of the temple is greater than World Bank. It was like 100,000 crores. For those of you from the West, 1 crore is 10 million. So 10 million times 100,000 rupees. That is the value of, what is it? 1 lakh crores, right? Crore is 10 million, correct. So 10 million times 100,000 is the rupees is the value of the treasure in Anantapadmanabha Swami temple. It's like unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. Greater than World Bank. You know, so that is its material treasure. And Prabhupada, I was recently hearing a lecture where Prabhupada says that in the material world, wealth is considered by money. But in spiritual life, wealth is considered by how much we are how much we have, how much of Krishna consciousness have we been able to perform to progress. That is the sign of wealth. So here, so which means the real treasure lies in the books. But who's going to unlock it? Nobody is unlocking it. Nobody had unlocked it. So much value. Prabhupada actually plundered that storehouse and distributed it. Of course, Lord Chaitanya said he plundered the storehouse of love of God and distributed it. But the distribution across the world had not happened. So Prabhupada plundered it for the Western world. So he unlocked it. That's the meaning. It had never been widely spread. In the most popular and basic Vedic text, Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna teaches that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that real religion, real knowledge, and real endeavor can be understood only when one dedicates his life to the loving service of the Lord. Only full surrender to the Supreme can bring one freedom from the laws of karma and the cycle of repeated birth and death. Srila Prabhupada was convinced that devotional service to Lord Krishna is life's goal, and that to engage others in devotional service is the highest welfare activity. Now, if you notice, these things two things go hand in hand. Like he's talking about Prabhupada is convinced that devotional service to Lord Krishna is life's goal, and to engage others in devotional service is the highest welfare activity. Simultaneously, both things are there, both practice and preaching, achar and prachar. And these convictions drove him in his traveling and preaching on behalf of the spiritual master Krishna. Srila Prabhupada's success in spreading Krishna consciousness was due to his being directly empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Chaitanya Charitamrita states, Kali Kalera Dharma Krishna Nama Sankirtana Krishna Shakti Vina Nahe Tara Pravartana. The fundamental religious system in the age of Kali is the chanting of the holy name of Krishna. Unless empowered by Krishna, one cannot propagate the Sankirtan movement. Yet, although Srila Prabhupada is empowered, his life story is not one in which success comes neatly and automatically, everything being miraculously enacted by God. Rather, Srila Prabhupada's story is one of constant attempts on behalf of a spiritual master. Successes come only after great endeavor and faith. So this is a very, very important point. Now, not just Prabhupada, the late life of great devotees like the Pandavas. So why does Krishna do this? Why does Krishna do this? Because only the Nityasiddhas, only his eternal associates can demonstrate that level of endeavor, faith, and dedication. So Krishna sets the best. He uses uses those who are very dear to him, like Arjuna, Prabhupada. Those who are very dear to the Lord. He engages them in activities which are seemingly human, to just show to the whole world this is the standard, this is the gold standard of what it means to practice pure devotional service. So Prabhupada set that gold standard for us. That the kind of difficulties that he goes through in volume 1, we'll see the kind of difficulties that he goes through single-handedly in India, then he goes to America. That'll come in the next volume though. But in the first volume that we're reading right now, so there we'll see how the amount of struggle that he had to undergo to try to execute the mission of a spiritual master. And the most beautiful thing is, despite that difficult struggle, Prabhupada's determination does not waver even an inch.
Prabhuji, the text is entirely white. Can it be made black?
What do you think? Yeah, can you? Just let us just try it for 30 in a minute. If we can do it, we'll do it. Else we'll continue. How do you get it? Like, this is part of the copy and paste. Or?
No.
Prabhu, copy and paste a Word file, Prabhu, that will come in white.
Prabhu, in this settings, you can change it from the color, Prabhu. No need to copy paste. That is the settings, Prabhu.
There's only font and text and stuff. No, there's no black option.
Can someone suggest how to do it from here? Or
Many.
venue?
Might be go to the setting of the browser and set the theme to dark.
You're not able to see anything, or is it difficult to see?
It is very difficult to see, Prabhu. Completely white.
Too
Light
strenuous
color.
to the eyes.
Okay.
We have to refresh the page or restart the browser.
We want to restart the browser again.
Pardon? Restart the browser?
Yeah.
I was thinking. Okay. If you restart it, you'll be able to get. Okay. Try.
Yeah, still white.
Because this is part of the thing. The theme background may be black. This background is cannot change, right? Unless you copy and paste.
Yeah.
Maybe it's more. I mean, I don't know how big is the introduction in this. Though. Just see how big it is.
So just copy to Word file, Prabhu. It is very simple.
Just copy the Word file and this paste it.
Huh?
Copy into Word file and paste.
Select all.
Or maybe just do Control A and select everything and let it scroll.
Yeah. Copy. Control C. Open a Word file.
Yeah. So many Word files.
Right click on New. Blank document. Control V.
Okay.
Increase size of the file, Prabhu. Nice.
All the teachings. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, next, right, find it down, and never inflate. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Okay. Is it fine now? Hare Krishna. Have you
Yes, it's okay. It's good now.
Okay. I just want to be sure that we are sharing the screen. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Successes come, but only after great endeavor and faith. Prabhupada encountered difficulties in trying to spread love of God in a godless world. He sometimes met opposition from governments, the media, and religionists, including those in India. And even within his own society, he met difficulties caused when his neophyte disciples fell to the allurements of the material world. Yet, through all difficulties, Srila Prabhupada persevered with sublime tolerance, kindness, and unflinching determination of a pure devotee of Lord Krishna. By material standards, it's extraordinary that a person of Srila Prabhupada's age could constantly travel, confront problems in opposition, and simultaneously produce volume after volume of translated Vedic literatures. But material vision cannot comprehend Srila Prabhupada's activities. He was truly a Mahatma, as described by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. The Mahatmas are always working under the direction of internal energy. In spreading Krishna consciousness, Srila Prabhupada is far from merely a religious zealot trying to increase a sect. His writing, traveling, and preaching were done in pure devotion to Lord Krishna and were therefore transcendental. It was Krishna himself, Srila Prabhupada saw, who was bringing the results. Lord Caitanya has stated, Prithvite ache yata nagaradi gram, sarvatra prachara haibe moranam. In every town and village, the chanting of my name will be heard. Just give me 1 second. Just 1 second.
And
After this. After this.
scan.
Yes, you won't be able to find this. You won't be able to find it on the phone.
After the class?
No, after this. I want to put that on the board.
So which one?
This one. Okay, Lord Caitanya has stated, Prithviche ache yata nagaradi gram, sarvatra prachara hoibe moranam. In every town and village, the chanting of my name will be heard. These words, directly spoken by Lord Caitanya, are certainly true. The Lord's predictions must come to pass. Many Gaudiya Vaishnavas, however, even as recently as the disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, considered Lord's prediction problematic. The name of Lord Caitanya in every town and village, you don't have to scan it separately. Just use a phone. Take a picture. Should this be taken allegorically? Certainly, the Americans, the Europeans, the Africans, the Polynesians, the Mongolians, the uncultured Mlecchas outside of India could never become Vaishnavas. Thus, Lord Chaitanya's words had seemed an enigmatic topic for speculation. Can you just put everything on mute? There's a hissing noise. Mute all. All right, okay. Thus, Lord Chaitanya's words had seemed an enigmatic topic for speculation. Now, first of all, it was considered it was not permissible for a sannyasi to cross the oceans and go to the west. Now, that itself is considered not permissible. Now, what to speak of, Prabhupada not only did that, which is generally not considered permissible. Of course, Prabhupada had very clear this thing that it's, it is generally considered not permissible, that's all. So because the people may fall down, that's the whole point. The basic idea. But Prabhupada went there not to mix with the people of the West. He went there to save them. So first of all, do something which is not generally permissible, and then to actually turn all of them into Vaishnavas. That's something which is we hear so many stories in the Bhagavatam, right? And so many different things. But this kind of story of Prabhupada is very, very unique. I mean, extremely unique. Just like Narada Muni, he goes and he convinces the hunter, don't half kill animals, But what probabilities are there when a saintly person is going to a hunter who half kills animals, takes pleasure in half killing animals, and he tries to present some Krishna consciousness to him, and he actually takes it up? That appears extraordinary. So like that, when Prabhupada actually went to the West and he did all these things, it may seem, because we are too close to Prabhupada, we may close in the sense that we are just soon after Prabhupada. But a few generations down the line, they think, what did Prabhupada actually do? What did he do? In the sense of how unbelievable it is that he actually made people from across the world take up to Krishna consciousness. That's not something which ordinary people can do. Srila Prabhupada, however, was under orders from his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, to preach Krishna consciousness beyond India. And alone in 1965, he took the great step and left India, crossed the Atlantic, and began the International Society for Krishna Consciousness in New York City. Although some of Prabhupada's godbrothers had gone to England some 30 years before, They had failed to establish anything and even had concluded that to give Krishna consciousness to the Western people was not possible. But Srila Prabhupada, fulfilling Lord Chaitanya's prediction, traveled and employed his disciples in traveling to open centers in New York City, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Boston, Montreal, Buffalo, Seattle. He also sent his disciples abroad to London and other countries, and they succeeded where Prabhupada's god brothers had failed. One very important point is that, first of all, to convince a Western audience about Krishna consciousness is not easy. It is extremely difficult to make them actually take up Vaishnava lifestyle. But Prabhupada did it. When he reached the shores of America, he writes, which we will study later on in this Jaladuta diary, that how will they understand this message of Krishna consciousness. So he says, please make my power of speaking suitable for their understanding. Now, to imagine that Prabhupada actually transformed Vaishnavas is one thing. But to imagine one more step, that young people, like the people who established Krishna consciousness in London were actually three couples, that's all. And they were very new to Krishna consciousness. They're very new to Krishna consciousness. But Prabhupada sent them, and where his god brothers had failed, some of Prabhupada's young disciples could do it. So that is the power of faith in the faith in the spiritual master and the parampara. Prabhupada had that implicit faith in Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He knew it. If my spiritual master said it, and I should do it with my heart and soul, he had that faith. So because he had that faith, he could also transmit that faith to his disciples. And he continues to transmit to that faith to all of us who want it. So he transmitted that faith to his disciples. And that is why, because of that, the treasure of that faith, they could go to London and establish the Krishna conscious movement there. Not only in London, initially they went to San Francisco, but I spoke about London because it is because London is a different, England is a different country. So even in a different country, they succeeded, where Prabhupada's godbrothers had failed. As the present volume explains, Srila Prabhupada traveled not only to enlist new devotees and establish Krishna consciousness in new places around the world, but also to maintain what he had already begun. Had he not continued to travel to each temple, instructing his disciples, observing their progress, correcting their mistakes, raising the standard of their Krishna consciousness, the devotees would not have been able to continue. Repeatedly, Prabhupada had to go around the world. Srila Prabhupada, by his faith in Krishna, by his selfless dedication to the order of a spiritual master, and by the blessings of Lord Chaitanya, did what no one else could have done. As Chaitanya Charitamrita states, Krishna Shakti Vina Nahe Tara Pravartana. Only one empowered by Lord Krishna can actually spread the chanting of Hare Krishna around the world. This volume is an account of years. Whenever you read this word, this volume, he's actually speaking, he's spanning more than the time in India. In this particular, this is Veda-based edition. This volume is an account of years of struggle and ultimate fulfillment in Srila Prabhupada's life, and I invite the reader to relish them. Here is the rags to riches story of one who started alone with nothing, but whose movement, writing, and personal life created an astounding and permanent impression on the world. By following Srila Prabhupada through these times, we gain an understanding of his exalted and humble life. I am unable to describe Srila Prabhupada fully. I have therefore composed an invocation, praying that I be permitted to tell the story purely from the transcendental viewpoint. Otherwise, it would be ruined and incomprehensible. When properly told, the life of the pure devotee brings the greatest joy and benefit to the hearers. Okay. I've asked Rudradeep Prabhu here to just take a screenshot or a photo, of the introduction that I want to read out. That's just 2 pages, but that is it's at a more fundamental level. That this is wonderful, but the introduction that I want to read out is at a more fundamental level. Well, I think that we may not be able to go on to the childhood passage today. This introduction came as a surprise to me. Otherwise, we would have finished it by now. Okay. What do you read?
Oh, and
You start to share screen? Screen?
no.
Send you mail.
Yeah.
So reach. I'll send it to your WhatsApp maybe.
Yeah, I can send you WhatsApp. Yeah,
You send
Yeah.
Pardon?
I can send you. Should I send you or
But then what? How will I share?
yeah, you can go WhatsApp web. So I'll send you.
You can. I'm not good at tech.
Yeah,
Not
I'll do.
anything technical.
What's your name?
Why don't you open your
Oh.
this again? Just you send it to me and from the reply.
Okay. What's your name?
Acintya. You have my number, so
No.
that's
What's your number?
you do it.
Okay.
973
977
555
55
55
55
55
Yeah.
37.
279.
Sorry for the this is a little bit of an unexpected thing that happened today. Just bear with us. In a few minutes, we'll share the screen. What's this? Okay.
Yeah, what's that?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Open me WhatsApp. Yeah.
Because I don't open it, is it? Why don't I just post it on the Telegram group? Just post it on the Telegram group.
I'm not in the Telegram.
Okay. You send it to me and post it on Telegram.
Yeah, I sent it to you.
I can share all four together.
Can we try the WhatsApp thing? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, short screen sharing. First stop. Stop it. You would stop. Share.
Yeah.
Let's go to the actual thing and share that. I will share it. The computer. Is it?
No, no.
I remember, when this closes, okay, what I'll do is I'll just share it I share it on the WhatsApp group in this thing of Parampara.
Okay.
I'm sorry, we're not able to share this document. What I'll do is I'll just post it on the, what happened? We went out of it.
No.
This one.
Yeah.
We're not able to share the document for some technical reason. So I'll just post the document on the Parampara-Vaibhava group. So that will... It's not an order, Rudradeep. Is it an order?
And from the last to.
Oh, you have to, okay.
From the last.
I've posted it on the Parampara-Vaibhava group. You'll have to go from last to the first. No, it's just messed up actually.
Last is intro.
It's messed up. Wait, 17, 18. Last is page number 17, then 18. Then you don't have 19, you have 20, then you have 19 in the group. Okay. The last document that I've posted on the Parampara-Vaibhava group is the first page of the introduction. Then you have to go upwards. The next one is second page. Okay. Give me the book. Let me start reading from the book. How much time we have left? Okay. I'll be able to cover it. Okay, again, we're going to start with this volume begins. This volume begins in Calcutta in 1896 with the birth of Abhay Charan De and ends in 1965 with Abhay Charanaaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami on his way to New York City aboard the steamship Jaladuta. Just to confirm, did all of you hear me that you have to open the last document on the last image on the WhatsApp group? Can you confirm if you're able to open it? Okay, all right, okay, fine. The worldwide fame of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, later known as Srila Prabhupada, was to come after 1965, after he arrived in America. Before leaving India, he had written 3 books. In the next 12 years, he was to write 60. Before he left India, he had initiated 1 disciple. In the next 12 years, he would initiate more than 4,000. In the previous introduction, we read about letters, but here is about disciples. So he had more than 4,000 disciples. Before he left India, hardly anyone had believed that he could fulfill his vision of a worldwide society of Krishna devotees. But in the next decade, he would form and maintain the International Society for Krishna Consciousness and open more than 100 centers. Before sailing for America, he had never been outside India, but in the next 12 years, he would travel many times around the world, propagating the Krishna consciousness movement. It had been predicted in the scriptures and envisioned by great saints. A few of Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers had even tried to make it happen. They had gone to England only to return convinced that it was impossible. But not until Srila Prabhupada traveled to America did it come to pass that Westerners wholeheartedly took up the life of Vaishnavism and became Krishna conscious devotees. This story of Srila Prabhupada's spiritual success is narrated in subsequent volumes of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita means the nectar of the pastimes of Srila Prabhupada. This is the definition of, this is the English translation of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. Beginning with volume 2, Planting the Seed, New York City, 1965 to 1966. Yet this present volume, which covers most of his lifetime, telling how he prepared himself for his late burst of revolutionary spiritual activity, is most important. This volume is titled A Lifetime in preparation. Now it's, I mean, it used to be called like that, a lifetime preparation, although this edition doesn't give any name. But originally, when the biography was released, the first volume was called A Lifetime Preparation. These first 69 years form a complete dramatic life story and do not depend on anything he did later to explain them. Abhay Sharan's father, Gaur Mohan De, carefully prepared Abhay from childhood for the life of a pure Vaishnava. Gaur Mohan taught him to worship Krishna and encouraged him. Beginning when Abhay was only 5, in his Lord Jagannath cart parade through the streets of their Calcutta neighborhood, a small Rath Yatra festival, the same festival Abhay was later to enact on a magnificent scale in many Western cities. Now, this is something very significant. We should note this, that when the British came to India, when they saw the Rath Yatra festival, they considered this the most classic example of primitive thought. If you look at Jagannath, when they saw the Jagannath Puri Rath Yatra, what happened was that you have, hundreds and thousands of people at that Rath Yatra, and you will also see, not now, but during those days, there would be people who try to fall in front of the wheels and get crushed under the wheels. First of all, for the British, deity so huge, without hands, without legs, some kind of it's some kind of an extremely weird kind of a deity, and so they used to call Jagannath the Moloch of Hindustan. That's a derogatory term referring to somebody who, Moloch of Hindustan means meant for the unintelligent class of people. That's what it means, basically. So for them, there's nothing greater than primitiveness of the Indians than for them when they witnessed the Jagannath Puri Rath Yatra festival. Now, and the British were very proud that the sun never sets on the British Empire. The meaning of that was that whichever part of the world you go to, you would find a British territory. So when the sun is setting in one British territory, it is rising in another British territory. There are territories across the world. So the British were very proud of that. The sun never sets on the British Empire like that. But if you look at what happened when Prabhupada went to the West, that same Jagannath whom they had called the Moloch of Hindustan, the British Empire had collapsed, but Jagannath had prevailed. Not only had Jagannath prevailed, but that same, the so-called primitive worship, Lord Jagannath was riding on his chariot right through the streets of London, through Trafalgar Square. This is Prabhupada's achievement, that what the British considered primitive, he proved it, that he made Jagannath right through the streets of London. So this is Prabhupada's achievement is actually extraordinary. If you look at history and historians will record this, that the fact that how the British considered this worship to be so primitive, now Prabhupada actually established that worship, Rath Yatra cart riding right through the heart of London. So that is Prabhupada's achievement. Okay, so here it says the same festival Abhay was later to enact on a magnificent scale in many Western cities. Srila Prabhupada used to say in his later days that whatever principles he had established as a leader of the Hare Krishna movement, he had learned in his childhood, but with but one important exception: book publication and distribution, which he had learned later from his spiritual master. So Prabhupada was born in a family of pure devotee. It was his first meeting with the spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, in 1922, that focused Srila Prabhupada's future into a meditation on how to carry out the mission of preaching Krishna consciousness in the West. After that first meeting, his entire life, his writing, his taking sannyas, his publishing books, and finally his going to the West became part of his dedication to carrying out the order of this higher authority. Srila Prabhupada's obligation to his wife and children and his attempts to develop a business career in the pharmaceutical industry may appear inconsistent with the single-minded determination to spread Krishna consciousness. Yet his earnestness in pursuing these responsibilities and the way providence finally extricated him from them proved important in his essential lifetime of preparation. Now, here is what we need to be careful. Now, sometimes I've heard devotees say, Prabhupada set a good example. He was working outside. Maybe Bhaktivinoda Thakur, they say, is even better example because he had a cooperative wife. These are all mundane visions. We're not supposed to look at the acharyas through how we understand the world and what is nice. Rather, their internal thing is what we need to look at. So although Prabhupada was engaged in so many activities, but internally he was always fixed in the order of his spiritual master. So that is something which we need to learn. So it is not that Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Prabhupada, they were all like ordinary people, so we can relate to them and all that. They behave like that. They behave like that so that we could relate to them. That's a different thing. But they are not in our category at all. They are just not in our category. They are jivas, of course. But they're not in our category. They're not in the they're not within the range of our understanding. They are not. We can never get them into our range of understanding. In the sense that in terms of understanding their exalted position, we can only like sparrows, like how Satsura Maharaj is talking. Only a little bit we may understand what we're talking. Only a little bit. So he's like unlimited ocean. So we should be always conscious of this fact. Oh, he behaved like a human being. That's a fact. I mean, he's a jiva, of course, but human being means having a human body. That's what I mean to say. So he may behave like one of us, but we should always remember this distinction that we cannot, even Lord Brahma cannot understand the activities of Krishna. And similarly, activities of a pure devotee cannot be understood by ordinary conditioned souls. So whatever inspires us, we can take it up. Yes, Bhaktivinoda Thakur's family life is exemplary. We can feel inspired, but they should, at no point should we think, oh, he's a little better than this, he's much better than me. It's not like that. There's no comparison between Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Prabhupada and us. We are fallen conditioned souls. I don't know if when I say we, I mean people like me. Maybe there are liberated souls in this assembly, but so I don't want to commit an offense of saying we, referring to everybody. But when I say we, it means those of us who are conditioned. So we should avoid the comparison between Prabhupada's ways of thinking and our ways of thinking. Our ways of thinking are stemming from our conditioning. Prabhupada's ways of thinking are stemming from his love of God. So externally they may look similar, but internally it's very, very different. It is coming from a different vantage point. Our thoughts are coming from a different vantage point. So therefore, there should be no attempt to compare the two. We can feel inspired, yes, but we should avoid that comparison. So okay. After he left his family responsibilities in 1950, he met with obstacles of obscurity and poverty. Prabhupada is quite a prominent businessman at that point. But once he left his business, what happened? He became obscure. Hardly people were bothered about him. And he was leading his own life. And not only he was leading his own life, he was well-to-do and he was maintaining his family well. But after he left everything, and then he became poverty-stricken also. And an insecurity imposed by the tumultuous times in which he lived. But again, his struggle to continue his mission was part of his preparation. In the light of Srila Prabhupada's unprecedented spiritual achievements in his later life, it seems inevitable that I should say something here about his being empowered by God. According to the Vedic scriptures, the lives of certain individuals are part of God's mission on earth. In the West, Jesus Christ is the best known example, a chosen son sent by God from the spiritual world. And in the East, the Vedic writings tell of various avatars of Lord Vishnu, incarnations of the Supreme Lord, with specific names, characteristics, and activities. Thus, Lord Krishna sometimes appears himself, and he sometimes empowers a particular devotee to do his work. Srila Prabhupada, in his commentary on Caitanya Charitamrita, explains about souls empowered by Lord Krishna. There are two kinds of living entities, Nityasiddha and Nityabadha. The Nityasiddha never forgets his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whereas the Nityabadha is always conditioned even before the creation. He always forgets his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By the order of the Supreme, the Nityasiddha remains within this material world like an ordinary man. but his only business is to broadcast the glories of the Lord. All Nityasiddhas within this material world may appear to toil like ordinary men, but they never forget their position as servants of the Lord. So this is the point that I was trying to make. They may appear like us, but they are not like us. They're definitely not like us. So that is something that we should remember very, very carefully. That he may appear like us, but he is not like us. I was thinking that okay. All right. No, I won't get into that right now because that may take quite a long time. So about how Prabhupada is not ordinary, we'll take that up as the classes progress. Not at this point in time, but I just gave a brief idea that Nityasiddhas, every activity they're looking at it from the platform of consciousness of love of God, but we are looking at it the consciousness of our sense enjoyment. So we should never attempt to compare the two. So I'll just leave it at that for now. In determining whether a person is empowered by God, the main consideration is the quality of his work. In Caitanya Charitamrita, the scholar Vallabha says to Lord Chaitanya, the fact that you have spread Krishna consciousness all over the world proves that you have Krishna Shakti, transcendental power from Lord Krishna. After Srila Prabhupada passed away in 1977, his senior godbrother, B.R. Sridhar Maharaj, quoted the same Krishna Shakti verse and applied it to Prabhupada. Unless he had been empowered by Krishna, he could not have spread Krishna consciousness as he did. When we consider Srila Prabhupada's identity as Lord Krishna's empowered representative, the years of struggle described in this volume take on a special sweetness. These years reveal little-known events in the life of a person who was always wrapped in devotional service, remembrance of Krishna. Although he struggled through many hardships, his struggles were not those of an ordinary man, for he lived solely to carry out the will of Guru and Krishna. I invite the reader to enjoy the very real human life story of Srila Prabhupada, who is known in this volume as Abhaicharan, SDG, that is Satsarup Das, it says SDG, which is Satsarup Das Goswami. So this is the introduction in the edition that used to be printed before, the 7 volumes. It's still being printed in India in 7 volumes. So I'll stop there. There's one thing that I wanted to say. This is not, I've not been able to find a Shastric reference to it. So don't take it as a Shastric reference and things like that. But it is just a story in terms of its, I'm telling the story just to make a point about what is our life centered around. You know? So this morning, after Mangalarti, I was, usually I take my son to Prabhupada's Bhajan Kutir. So he was along with another friend of mine, and they were circumambulating Prabhupada in the Bhajan Kutir. And then I remembered one story that I had heard during childhood, and I related the story to my son. The story goes like this. Many of you may have heard it, or these days, I don't know if you've heard the story, but in the past, this was a pretty famous story. I can't provide a Shastric reference, so even if the story is not true, but you don't have to worry about it. Just think about the essence of it. That's all. So there once Narada Muni, it says that he'd given a mango to Lord Shiva, and which had come from Lord Brahma. You know, so Lord Shiva and Parvati were in a dilemma. Which son to give it to? They had 2 sons, Ganesh and Kartikeya. They didn't know whom to give it to. So they said, let's create a competition. Whoever wins the competition will get this. So Lord Shiva and Parvati, they asked Kartikeya and Ganesha that you all can, whoever travels the whole world first will be able to get this fruit. Now, Kartikeya, his vahana, his vehicle, like today we have cars and all that. In the past, they had, non-mechanical objects as vahanas. So the vahana of Kartikeya is not in the past, they still exist actually. So Vahana of Kartikeya is a peacock, whereas all of you know Lord Shiva's Vahana is a mouse. So the moment he got this, he heard this, Kartikeya set out trying to travel the whole world, and then Ganesha thinks, look, I have to travel the whole world. Then he realizes that actually I don't need to travel the whole world. I can just circumambulate my parents. They are the whole world to me. So he begins to circumambulate his parents. Meanwhile, Kartikeya is traveling. When he reaches different holy places, he sees Ganesha there. He says, how did you reach here? He says, yeah, I reached here. He's very surprised. How is this possible? How can he travel on the Vahana like a mouse and then he reaching faster than me? And finally, when he finishes the trip and reaches back, he reaches Lord Shiva and Parvati, Ganesh is already there. So he says, how did you do this? So then he explained, no, for me, my parents are my whole world. I just circumambulated them. That's it. So I was telling my son that for the members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, Srila Prabhupada is like that. We believe that if we just circumambulate Prabhupada, not physically just circumambulate, that's fine. We have to do that. But also in our consciousness, if our consciousness simply circumambulates around Prabhupada, then that is the perfection of our life. So I just felt that this would be a good meditation as we launch into Prabhupada's pastimes from the coming week onwards to just set the mood. So we want our consciousness to revolve around Srila Prabhupada. Okay, so I think I'll stop here if there are any questions or any comments also. So messages from the chat. Any questions in the chat? No. Okay. Are they allowed to unmute and ask them if they want to? Or they raise their hands? They raise their hands. Bankim Govinda Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, there's a doubt for me. Is the Prabhupada Leelamrita in online, which has got 2 books, 2 volumes, is it the same? The chapters are the same as this, the printed books, which has got, I think, 5 books, right?
Chapters would be the same. Chapters would be the same, just that it's just organized in a different manner. That's all. Chapters would be the same. Yes, there won't be any chapters different from the chapters for sure.
Organized in different, it'll be in the same sequence, Prabhu.
Same sequence, yes. Only the introduction is varied because this introduction is written for this volume, whereas that introduction is written for half the thing, right? Half his pastimes, right? Therefore, there's a small difference in the introduction.
Okay, thank you.
However, I also noticed there's a small thing which I can just, since we finished a little early, I just thought I'll just read it out. There is a small, can you just open the preface to this online? There's a small, this thing, which I think I'll just cover, which is slightly different. Preface. Yeah. Not different, but a little less in detail. Now, there is one paragraph in the introduction that I left, which in the preface that I read, which is missing from the preface that I had. Because of the confusion in the introduction, I thought I was a little confused whether it's going to come in the. Although I just remembered vaguely it was there in the preface, but I noticed it was not there in this preface which I read online. So I thought maybe it'll come in the introduction. It didn't come in the introduction. But there's a very important point which Satsvarupa Maharaj makes in the preface to this book edition. It is from Srila Prabhupada's commentary on the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He talks about the transcendental process. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he receives the order of the senior Vaishnavas in Vrindavan, and he goes takes permission from Madan Mohan. Then he starts writing the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So in that regard, Satsvarupa Maharaj quotes from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. This transcendental process is further described by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, in his commentary on the Chaitanya Charitamrita as follows. So please hear this very carefully, since you don't have a version of it which I can show now, but you can hear it, just one paragraph, that's all. To write about the transcendental passage of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not an ordinary endeavor. Unless one is empowered by higher authorities or advanced devotees, one cannot write transcendental literature. For all such literature must be above suspicion, or in other words, it must have none of the defects of conditioned souls, namely mistakes, illusion, cheating, and imperfect sense perception. The words of Krishna and the authority and the disciplic succession, this is important. The words of Krishna and the disciplic succession that carries the orders of Krishna are actually authoritative. One must first become a pure devotee, following the strict regulative principles and chanting 16 rounds daily. And one thinks is actually on the Vaishnava platform. He must then take permission from the spiritual master. And that permission must also be confirmed by Krishna. Okay, the point that he's trying to say is that what do you call it? To write about transcendental literatures is not an ordinary endeavor. So that because such literature should be above suspicion, it should have no mistakes of the conditioned souls, like illusions, cheating, mistakes, illusions, cheating, and imperfect sense perception. Now, if the writing should not have that, how can the person who is describing itself have it? It's not possible. So there's no scope for saying that there are some mistakes which Prabhupada made or whatever. Anyway, we'll deal with that at a later point in time. There are apparently some transcendental errors, as they say, but it is not a mistake as we understand it from our conditioned perspective. We'll take that up later. But the point is, what to speak of Prabhupada being pure, even the writer has to be able to present Prabhupada properly, should also be a strict follower of Prabhupada. Otherwise, one will not be able to present Srila Prabhupada properly. We'll only present Prabhupada through our conditioning or through the modes. Unless we follow strictly, we'll not be able to get a glimpse into the real Prabhupada. Okay. So I think I'll stop there. Any other question?
Can I ask one question?
Sure, Prabhu.
Prabhuji, I wanted to check with you, while you are doing the Lilamrit based on those 7 volumes, will you be supplementing any, say, very important or useful incidents which are not in these 7 volumes but have been written by Prabhupada disciples in their biographies?
Yes, that is what I plan to do. Although there is very little material on what happened before he went to America, hardly anything on that.
I heard that Moola Prakriti Mataji has written quite a bit about that before, what happened in case of Prabhupada before he went abroad in Vrindavan and else.
Yeah, I would not want to get, that's a good book though, but I would not want to rely on that because I would prefer to stick with what Prabhupada himself spoke, because what happens is that when you have incidents like this, when you don't have any other witnesses, I'm not saying the incidents are wrong. Incidents could all be right, but its authenticity, for example, all the events of the Lilamrita, its authenticity is beyond doubt, it's completely beyond doubt. So the authenticity of incidents where others were not present, who are reliable witnesses, so that becomes a little bit difficult, because sometimes what happens is that this is just the human nature. When someone becomes famous, it's natural to try to associate with them. So then there may be different passages which will come up, and we have no way of actually authenticating whether it happened or not. So I would suggest more like a private reading of those things rather than taking it out and then doing it as a part of a course, because at least there you have some, you can use your discretion. But to teach it in a course, I have no reference point to say whether whatever I teach would be, you'll be able to cross-reference it. I mean, in terms of not cross-reference. At least the Leelamrita, there's no need of any cross-reference, because there are many people when these incidents happen. If you notice the nature of the Leelamrita, it's like that. It's like even the personal recollections are all in tune with the overall message of Krishna consciousness. Now, for example, there are some instances which Prabhupada himself confirms, like how Rupa Goswami appeared to him physically at Radha Damodar temple. That Prabhupada himself says. So there are some things which Prabhupada directly confirms. There are other things which we don't have any any confirmation from Prabhupada about it. So we take it. It is true until it is wrong, but I don't think it would be appropriate to teach it as part of a course. But regarding, say, for example, there are some incidents where you have more perspectives, all of them equally valid perspectives, more additional information. That I would be presenting, because we have so many other biographies of, at least the pastimes of Prabhupada that have been documented by Arishwari Prabhu. There are so many other books, The Great Transcendental Adventure, Kurma Prabhu, My Glorious Master, Burijan Prabhu. So there we get varying details there. Not varying means like more details. More variegatedness may be there in that. So wherever those kind of things are there, I would definitely be, that's my plan, to present a comprehensive comprehensive picture of each pastime as much as possible, whatever detail we know. Is it okay?
Yeah, okay, Prabhuji, thank you.
So should we stop there if there are no more questions? What do we do? Is it? Okay, so I think we'll stop for today, and then for tomorrow onwards, we'll deal with the pastimes will go on at a much faster pace than these are things about trying to understand Prabhupada. There also we'll try to understand him, but it'll go at a much faster pace.
Prabhuji, regarding the pastimes, one small question.
Sure.
When you're covering the pastimes, I'm sure certain important siddhantas will come out there. So you would specifically underline or cover those in little more detail. The importance of that siddhanta or principle or conclusion, especially for us practicing devotees.
Yes, that's the whole purpose of teaching the course, to understand the life of the pure devotee and to feel inspired and to follow in the footsteps of the pure devotee. Right? We're trying to follow the footsteps of Prabhupada, but then we have to understand him, and then only we can try to follow in his footsteps. Right? So there's definitely going to be there. There's definitely going to be there. But it is set in the context of so much Leela. So, whereas here we are only talking about philosophy, hardly we spoke about any pastimes here with Prabhupada. So there, majority of it would be pastimes. Not majority, I can't say majority. But anyway, there will be a lot of pastimes. And wherever needed, whatever is the underlying principle there, we would elaborate on that and then take questions on it and feel how to apply that in our lives and things like that. Yes, no.
And also clarification on sometimes what devotees perceive as maybe contradictory action or contradictory what Prabhupada has said. So those also need to be covered to understand really exactly what was the context and how it can be applied or not applied. Those also we need to learn so that we don't make the mistake.
That's correct. Correct. I fully agree with you. Yes, that's part of the course. Yes, definitely.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay.